Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. An Aleph is a high point from which all things are visible, and from our vantage point, we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. Around here, our motto is to be fair, build up, and have fun. I'm your host, GriffinVarro, joined by our editor Theta, our local designer, Norman Rafferty, and our good friends and GMs, RedRabbit and Robert Grosso. When it comes to tabletop games, I have 15 years of experience running, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rule sets at the table. Pronouns are he, him, they, them. Red, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm RedRabbit. I'm eating a slice of buffalo chicken pizza, so my nose is running.
Hell yeah.
I am I'm the GM who's running our Iron Claw game on Wednesdays, which you should come and check out. I'm also excited to be finally trying to play Forbidden Lands on Sundays on the channel. You can check that out too. I enjoy a myriad of tabletop RPG games. I'm always reading rule books for games I will not ever get the opportunity to play, but I don't care. And because of this, I consider myself a student of narrative design, but also of game design.
All right, real good. Robert, what about you?
Hello, everybody. My name is Rob Grosso. I am the GM for the Pathfinder game on Wednesday nights on the Raktus channel. I also write for the website techraptor.net. And I also have my own Twitch stream, which you can check out, like me playing a bunch of RPGs, twitch.tv/partygoblins. Pronouns he, him, and yeah, that's all I got. No buffalo pizza for me.
Sounds good. Rafferty, what about you and pizza?
I'm a buffalo pizza. Hello world, I'm Norman Rafferty, he, him. I work for Sanguine Games. Pretty soon, probably after this is aired, I will be at First Square, April 14th. So if I saw you there, it was nice to meet you. And if for some reason I didn't make it, and this is tragic, I'm sorry to haunt you.
All right. Well, speaking of haunting things, let's go take a look at my notes here. Hey guys, my notes for today here just say THAC0 is wacko. You guys know anything about that? There are some absolutely written rules out there, and today we're just gonna make fun of them. You know that build up and have fun stuff? Forget about it. We're tearing everything down right now. So I get this feeling that you may have actually brought this up, Rafferty. What do you think? What do you want to make fun of today?
Oh, is this the mean podcast?
This is the meanest text that we've ever had. We should
somebody else go. I hate everything.
All right, so let's...
I'll go.
All right, Rob, give us some rules that are just weird and no one should play.
Rolling for breath weapon when you fall off a horse.
Okay,
Oh.
you're going back 30 years.
I know. I'm doing that as a joke. I'm sorry.
Okay, it in Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition, they had saving throws that weren't just fortitude or will or dex. They had them labeled as versus spell versus petrifaction. And one of them specifically was saving throw versus breath weapon, which comes up because there's dragons. Yeah. But since that's the dex-based saving throw, they had side notes in there that said, okay, so if you ever have to make a dex-based saving throw to avoid something like falling off a horse, make a saving throw versus breath weapon. This is an example of why D&D 2nd edition was straining at gnats to swallow elephants. It was a terrible game. It's why 3rd edition says, reflex save. Done. Now we don't have to spend a paragraph explaining why we do this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The latest edition of the Cyberpunk game has a skill in its collection of like 75 skills. One of the skills is to resist drugs and torture. So that seems like a similar thing where it's like, oh yes, this is just like a constitution skill. But we couldn't think of a better way to label it or make it distinct from other skills than to call it resist drugs, so like the effect of drugs on your body, and also torture, like someone beating you with a chain.
Because it works on both, because your physical resistance to anesthesia is exactly the same as your resistance to psychological methods to break your will.
Everyone knows this.
And I know we have a constant whipping boy around here. What was it? I'm trying to remember right now. Maybe he'll come back to me here in a minute.
It was.
I mean,
There's one particular
recently-
rule that a lot of games have that no one ever uses, and I'll just bring it up. The aging rule. Every version of D&D, including D&D 5th edition, and once again, this rule is not optional. You are required to list an age on your character, and it has to be a numerical number. And when your character is generated, every game master is supposed to randomly determine the age at which your character will die of old age. This is not an optional rule. And it is only in D&D because the ghost. There is exactly one monster in D&D that has an aging attack, and it's the ghost, which can make you age several years by encountering you. They keep putting it in the game because the aging rule
it's
is
still there.
Right. Gotta
I think
keep
there's
that
other-
up to date, right?
I think there's other monsters too. I feel like the Sphinx has
There's
a
hundreds
lair
of
ability.
monsters.
Wraiths,
There's probably another one. Like
Wraiths,
there's hundreds of them.
whites, anything that's undead really can do that. And
No,
what's worse,
those train levels.
yeah, well, I was actually about to get to that actually, because the drain level rule then adds on top of that, and I think they're the only creatures that have that, and mechanically,
Lots of shit drains levels.
More of it
anything with
over
an-
time.
I could just
But
think
if
of
we're
undead,
talking-
really.
But if we're talking about draining levels,
Also-
if I recall right, as far as near as 3.5 for D&D, when you got a negative level, you had to undo everything you did when you leveled up.
Well,
You had to
level drain
backtrack
got-
every single thing, and additionally, you could be a character who spends experience to craft items and loses a level.
Well, no, because they specifically told you that if you in D&D 3rd edition, when you spend experience points to go down to craft an item, you couldn't do it to reduce your level, which actually puts a cap on what you're allowed to crank out.
Mhm.
But that's a controversial rule. I mean, the aging rule, I always bring that up because no one does this. And also, the other reason why I bring up the aging rule, because of Elminster. Elminster's entire character concept is the aging rule doesn't apply to his character.
We have a rule specifically so that one of our NPCs can ignore it. It is honestly the most ridiculous thing that I've ever thought of.
Well, it's 2nd edition D&D in a nutshell. I mean, look at THAC0 or THAC0. How do you call it? THAC0
No,
or
okay.
THAC0?
I go with that.
THAC0 is actually a sensible rule because it's like, okay, every character had a target number that they had to hit, and then you just subtracted the armor class for that. So, for example, if I hit AC 0 on a 15 or better, then I hit AC 5 on a 10 or better. I just add, plus 5. And if they're -5 armor class, then I hit them on a 20 or better. Now, what you should be asking is, why the fuck does armor class go from positive to negative and negative is good? That's the dumb rule.
Right,
that's
and
also
they literally set it up in reverse.
That's also
Because-
why it's always considered the whipping boy of these type of rules.
Which is weird because I mean, I'm pulling out aging as my whipping boy because it's a mandatory rule that none of you are doing. Like I could, like everyone agrees it's mandatory, but no one's actually doing it. Like if I sat down at your gaming table and said, "So the aging rules are in play, right?" Everyone would say, well, "Yeah, why wouldn't they be?" So the GM rolled the year we all die, right? Well, no, of course it hasn't come up yet. Okay. It's like one of those rules like I was complaining about in the previous podcast. It's one of those toxic rules where it's a rule that is in play, it's mandatory, and is only going to show up when you finally engage the ghost, which you will eventually do because I can make a ghost show up in your D&D game because I'll show up and bring up the aging rule and a GM will put in a ghost out of spite.
But can you make a ghost out of something like a lizard man?
Yeah, there used to be explicit templates, and you just go, here's a monster, here's the template, here's Ghost on Lizard Man, Ghost Lizard Man.
Okay, they got rid of templates.
They got rid of them.
Yeah, that's another rule that sometimes gets glossed over. A lot of GMs I know don't even bother with it. They just go for the standard, what's written type of, oh, here's the ghost template, here's the undead template. Have you ever seen undead giants before, for example?
Yeah, and I think templates were fun because it's a great way to like improvise a little or get things into a theme where there's not enough monsters in that theme in the first place.
Oh,
But
no, I missed them.
but to
Yeah,
make fun of templates here, there's no limit to adding those onto a thing. You can stack them together and create an absolute monstrosity.
I agree
Oh.
with you, and that's the problem with templates, because you can literally throw 3 or 4 of them on something at once. All of a sudden, you have like a level 100 demon-blooded, undead
Demon-blooded
giant.
half-dragon,
Well,
undead lich kobold who's
that
now
doesn't-
CR 20.
that doesn't make templates a bad rule. That makes your game master an asshole. Because
it does.
Yes.
in D&D 5, they'll still throw Draco Liches at you.
Let me whip 4th edition for a second, because it still had templates, and there's a lot of good stuff about 4th edition, a lot of bad stuff. But I legit created an encounter that was the most frustrating thing possible. I decided to add the Fey template to basically a giant snake. I'm like, okay, that's not too bad in and of itself. Let me take a look at what this is. Oh, right. It avoids the first damage it takes every single round, and it has an effect where it has like a 50% miss chance in the first place. So if you have 4 people attacking it, 2 of them are going to miss, 1 of them misses automatically, and the spellcaster was not there that day.
Okay. No,
So
I have
there we go.
I have the best story, which is official material. All right, you ready?
Oh, I gotta hear this.
So D&D 3rd edition comes out, and they have a book called the Dragonomicon, which is a book all about dragons.
Yes.
And it has one of my favorite sidebar notices in it. It's related to templates, where they describe that there is a horny blue dragon. They don't say the word horny, but they mention it's been running around and siring new creatures up to and including shambling mounds. There are half dragon, half shambling. Now, what is a shambling mound? A shambling mound is a plant. It is specifically a giant mossy clump. Kind of looks like the man thing or the swamp thing or whatever. It's a swamp monster. It is plant. It's not even animal. It's vegetable. And so I have now put the image in all of your heads, official material, copyright Hasbro, of a dragon humping shambling mounds.
I mean, the one thing we do know about the shambling mound is they don't move very fast. So I don't
there's
see
another
how that
thing you should
breaks
know
your-
about shambling mound, which is what makes this the most egregious abuse. Do you know what the other thing is about shambling mounds? Does Rob know? Come on, Rob. What's the thing about shambling mounds? Help me out, Rob. You're old school, Grognard.
No, I'm not. I'm assuming it has something to do with the fact that they're plants.
No. It in fact has everything to do with the fact that they're actually a ripoff of a Marvel character named Man-Thing.
Oh, that.
They
Okay.
are immune. Not only are they immune to electricity, but electricity heals them. They are almost unique in that regard, that any electrical attack heals them. Now, I mentioned this was a blue dragon, right?
Yes, you did.
So even though this is just a side note of horny dragon humps plants, that means that he's siring a race of half shambling mound, half blue dragons, with the blue dragon template applied to the shambling mound, which means there are a bunch of shambling mounds wandering around that can breathe lightning, which is an AoE effect that would heal each other.
Now, you want to know the funniest thing? I'm running a module right now, and though they're not doing the shambling mounds for it, they've literally recreated it a second time, but this time with treants, who can cast electricity and then also heal from it. Why? Presumably because someone read that and went,
well, they
this
half
sounds
dragon.
like a great way to frustrate people.
Right. But I mean, yeah, in fact, that's what I'm getting at. Is like, so yeah, I mean, I love your treants with lightning. I mean, if they're oak trees, I could kind of see it because the oak is associated with light. But like this whole thing of like, this was official published material, and this is like just a stupid sidebar. So when the GM pulls out the half shambling mound, half blue dragon and fights you with it, they can point out it's official lore. I didn't come up with this. It's in the book.
To be fair, though, that is kind of amazing at the same time as being incredibly weird and silly.
Everybody, it's on record. Robert Grosso thinks it's amazing that blue dragons hump plants.
It's amazing to me, mostly because of kind of the audacity like, first off, why did you think that was a good idea? And second, and more importantly, why did you publish it?
Well, I'll tell you,
unmitigated
because
gall.
cynical Rafferty is going to point out you don't turn in an empty manuscript. These 300-page books don't write themselves.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, like, I'm always being cynical about this. Also, like, this is one of those things that we're complaining about. I'm glad we're seeing more games doing improv because, like, there's this. I'm coming at this from a publisher. I've had people complain, your book is too small. Why isn't it bigger? It's like, well, what do you want in it? Like, we already gave you all the rules to, make your own characters and improv. It's like, no, it needs to be bigger. It needs more stuff in it. So you wind up padding this out. You get the vampire books that have those 40-page fiction vignettes that you all read, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No.
You all read the you've read every single 2-page introduction to every class in D&D 5, right? There's a 2-page fiction introduction to every single class, right? You've read those?
Exactly. I have 16 hours to spend. Why not?
Well, all right, to be fair, I have read those, yes.
Right. I mean,
I read
some
them
people have.
once when I started playing.
If there's
Right,
one thing that
and-
I know, it's what is a role-playing game.
What is a role? To do this, we must go back to ancient Greece.
Dice are
yeah,
polyhedral
so-
objects.
So, I mean, this is getting a big meta thing of, like, do designers have any responsibility about what they put in the game? Because, like I said, it's not just that some guy wanted to put wacky blue dragons in the game. They wrote it and sold this as a book. So now when someone else does it, they can do what I just said. This was in the book. And that's one thing I always want to get at. There'll be a lot of game masters, a lot of people are sitting at the table and saying, this was in the book. I didn't do this. I have authority here because the book is an authority source. Because people do that. People say it's in the book. We should do it the way it's in the book.
Yep.
And that's why we're making fun of this stuff.
I'm honestly more surprised they didn't save it for the Book of Erotic Deeds. Which,
I knew
there's
a
the
guy who
whole
had
trio
those
of
books.
books here that nobody should ever read.
I remember that was because I was also
the
like,
book of erotic fantasy is actually boring as shit.
It's pretty boring. Rather, like, the Book of Vile Deeds is like the book where you read and you
The
go,
book of
why
Vile
would
Darkness
anyone?
has more porn in it because the book of Vile Darkness
Yes.
has, speaking of silly rules, it has lich loved in it, which is our favorite. Because lich loved is if you have that feat, undead ignore you. But the prerequisite for it was our favorite statement, which was the prerequisite is, quote, you must have had perverse sex with the undead.
Ah, he's got it. He's got it.
Oh, he's got it right there.
I-
Yeah.
I inherited it from a friend, I swear to God. Oh, look, it has the sticker. Look, warning, content is intended for mature audiences only. We were definitely
Because-
like
Oh,
14
I
years
can't
old.
read it then.
Air
13
quote
years
mature. Air quote mature.
I would also like to repeat that the Dragonomicon, which has descriptions of blue dragons humping plants, did not have such a warning on it. But
That's
the
just,
Book of
that's just farming.
Well,
That's animal husbandry.
That's a yes. Thank you. Well, Ed Greenwood would tell you about the polymorph spell. But the best part, like the statement that perverse sex with the undead, it's a loaded statement because you have to wonder, like, well, what is like normal sex with the undead? Is that like missionary position or something? Or
I think the idea is that it's perverse. You're committing necrophilia in your game, I think, is the problem
hey,
there.
there are some vampire players who will take issue with that.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's
My
okay.
humanity,
'cause it's
hi.
well, no, it's okay there because it's sexy necrophilia.
Well, why does it say perverse sex with the undead? Why does it just say sex with the undead? Why do they have to qualify it?
You gotta romance the lich first if you want it to be normalized,
Yeah.
not perverse.
Get them some chocolates, maybe a poisoned apple or two.
Buy them a nice spell book of how to destroy the world. You
The
know,
problem
he's
is that's
sweet.
semantic. That's not perverse. When you go to buy the feat, the other undead won't be impressed. It's like, you and your very basic cosmopolitan ways of
Your
making love to
vanilla
the undead.
necrophilia.
We see you and judge you.
I'll
And
be
find
hon-
you wanting.
I'll be honest, a discussion on THAC0, I did not expect to talk about necromancer necrophilia.
Yeah.
All official material,
Good.
copyright Hasbro.
I know.
See, when I thought what we were going to do this episode was just attack more game design decisions, And
We
I was
could still do
prepared to
that.
dunk on Torchbearer.
Well,
Similar, but
you want one game
oh.
well, you just picked up one of my favorite books, which is Book of Vile Darkness, and that is a book to attack because Book of Vile Darkness has a problem. So it has to add on all this evil stuff to the game. Except you're all murder hobos. Who gives a shit? You kill things for money. How does it get more evil than that? You know, and also D&D already.
Now.
Well, you're getting to that. There's also like D&D already has dominate person, which you cast it on someone and their body becomes a puppet that has to do whatever you want. Whatever you want. That's a default spell in the book that has no alignment attached to it. It's not evil. It's neutral. It's a wizard spell. What's more evil than that? So you have the problem. You have this Book of Vile Darkness where we have to come up with stuff that's more evil, but not anything that's going to get us canceled because this is before the word canceled. So now you've got a problem where, like, okay, so there's a spell in Book of Vile Darkness that says that you can, if you have a disease, if I have a disease, I can touch someone else, cast the spell, and they automatically get that disease.
Yes.
Now,
that's default.
What's the problem with the spell? Or tell me.
It never affects any NPC because you kill them first.
No, it's not the problem. More basic than that. What is the problem with the spell I just described?
You're gonna be
I'll make it simple. There's already a spell in the book called There's already a spell in the book called Cause Disease that gives a disease to someone else, and you don't have to have it yourself.
Oh, I thought you were actually talking about that one. I didn't know they rewrote it.
No.
I was going to point out that that's kind of how most diseases are transmitted to begin with. So
and that's also how diseases are transmitted anyway. So why would you go through all the effort to catch a disease and then memorize and become a spellcaster and then cast a spell, give it to other people when you could either just give them the disease because you are diseased, or cast Cause Disease on them because it's the same range. It's touch. We use Cause Disease on them and just give them the disease without. That's the huge problem of Book of Vile Darkness, because there's all this stuff in it of you do an evil thing and then do it to someone. But D&D is already so stupidly magical that anything you would want to do, you could already do. Like, for example, there's a 7th level spell that if you cast it will give you one of your eyes turns into a beholder stalk. And it says, well, that sounds great, except it turns into a random beholder stalk. So what if you get what happens if you get the anti-magic eye? Well, then you can't cast any spells because it works on you. What if you get the one that does cause light wounds at range? Great. You just sacrificed a 7th level spell to do 1d8 with a ranged touch attack. And also the dumbest thing about this is a 7th level spell. You know what a 6th level spell is? Disintegrate. That just kills a motherfucker outright.
Yo.
This is actually a good point, because what we often see is just bloat when it comes to those type of rules. And I know it's all the whole point of it is to sell a product, right? It's all about we gotta support things. But you see this in a lot of games that are very long in the tooth. I'm a big fan of 4th edition D&D. I really like 3rd, but 3rd is a slog to really get through it nowadays. And even the games that are much like it, like Pathfinder, which is basically 3rd edition with better editing. There's too much wishy-washy on that. Too much bloat that goes into it. You have 20, 30 books that could be on the table at any given time. As GM, I always have to limit what's available, mostly to things that I've read or at least somewhat familiar with, for example, on those type of situations. And that's just for the games that have all that support. If you're playing a game, and I know, Red, you're going to talk about Torchbearer in a second, where there's a small amount there, you don't have a lot of wiggle room, especially when your rules might be very poorly written or poorly implemented.
Well, and this is something related to the Pathfinder problem. Was the joke I mentioned was people had to start playing Pathfinder because after they shut down the D&D 3 servers, no one could play it anymore. So Pathfinder, it was this weird thing of where people felt like they had to stop playing D&D 3 because Pathfinder was supported, and by supported, they kept coming out with books. And because you can only sell, they came out with lots of adventures, so their credit, good on them. But they also came out with a lot of players books because players outnumber GMs 5-1, and those books sell better. And so Pathfinder has some of the like dumbest rules of all time in it.
It does.
Like
it has a lot
I've already mentioned like the feat that you buy that gives you a bonus to the feat that if you make a successful bluff, your captor will loosen your restraints, which will then give you a bonus on your escape artist to escape, which is so stupid on multiple levels because it's a feat. Rob was just talking, couldn't I just improv a bluff check to try and get a bonus by escape artist? No, you can't. There's a feat for it now. There's a rule. If you don't have this feat, you're not allowed to do it.
If there is something you can do in Pathfinder, I guarantee you there's a feat tucked away in page 329 in the Rogue's Handbook somewhere that only like two
and
dozen
often
people
they're
have.
worse. Like I pointed out, there was the feat that lets you, if you bought this feat, you could taste a potion, and if you beat a DC 30 on a spellcraft check, it would tell you what the potion was, which you have to stop and go, wait a minute, the default rules, I only have to be a DC 25 without the feat. This feat actually makes it harder. Speaking of the better editing in Pathfinder.
Yeah.
Better
maybe not better editing in terms of how it's written, but better editing in terms of touching up some of the rules actually in there from 3rd to 3.5 to Pathfinder.
Well, the problem I'm getting at is I can point out all these little things that were actually like you take a feat and gets you worse. The basic book had the prone shooting feat that it was a feat that if you took it and you dropped prone, your armor class goes up by 4. Except that's a default ability. Everyone gets that for free. This feat does nothing.
Yeah. I know
That's an editing issue.
So what about you, Torchbearer Red?
Right. So let's talk about Torchbearer because you guys love that game.
Yeah. Come
so
on.
this is great because Rob played it with me, so we were both in this Torchbearer game.
This is perfect.
The game that is now the Forbidden Lands game because we kind of did a mass exodus from Torchbearer because we ran into a lot of problems with it. There's a lot of things to say, but I think if I'm going to focus on one aspect of it, I would like to focus on the combat, because the more I try to unpack the way the combat and conflict system works in the game, the less sense it makes to me. I think there's some noble ideas in here, but I think that once you see it in practice, I do not think it works. It's mean to do to just call out a game for just having broken systems. But usually I can see...
Torchbearer is even worse because they already had that same broken system in Mouse Guard and Burning Wheel. So this is like the 3rd game to have the same broken system. This is what I'm complaining about as a designer, because people keep repeating the same mistakes because no one calls them out on it. Like, Torchbearer is the 3rd game to use that system that you're even telling me is broken on its face. How did we get to 3 games like this?
Right, and there are cases where, I mean, you mentioned Rollmaster earlier. Like, people come to the game for that experience. I have a hard time imagining what it is about this combat that attracts people. So I'll break it down again. I played it. Rob played it. I think we were first timers.
Yeah, both first time on that one.
Both first time, but we're playing with smart people. Rob, from the games that we've played together, I can tell is not afraid of rules. We were also playing with Theta, who is like, he lives for rules and weird rule interactions. I would say that we're a competent group of people trying to decipher this rule system. So from what I recall, right, the first step of any conflict is you gather together all of the players and you determine a stat that will determine the group hit points for your side of the conflict, which is weird right away. What did you say?
I said, AKA the largest stat.
Yes, so different conflicts will use different stats, but basically you want to get the most of these hit points, obviously. So it's not really so much a like decision point, it's just a which one of these numbers is highest, right? Then you divide that number among your party members. So every person in your party gets the same number of hit points based out of this pool, except the pool will never divide evenly by the number of people in your party, because it's determined by another stat. So that means that the first decision point in the combat is deciding which of our party members deserves to have more life expectancy than the other ones, which I don't know. That rubs me the wrong way to start with. So then you get to the combat proper. There's this complex system where the player characters are like cycled in and out of the combat in rounds. I guess in a way this kind of mimics like the old school JRPGs like Final Fantasy, where you only have like 3 members, but sometimes like when they die, other members will fill their spot. But the big thing that bothers, so I talked about the hit points. So there's situations you've got a party leader who's actually the one who's making all of the decisions. So it's a game where...
Can I make you pause right there?
Yeah, go for it.
The reason why Torchbearer has you rotate the characters in and out is because it uses the mouse guard system. And the mouse guard system said you can't have more than 3 players. Don't play with more than 3 players.
Very
Really?
interesting.
Okay.
Very interesting. So
that's in the book, that you're not supposed to have more than 3 players. Every stream that you've seen of anyone playing mouse guard with more than 3 players has already broken that rule.
It's already doing it wrong. And, I mean, at least it's a rule in mouse guard. From what I can tell in Torchbearer, there's no such restriction. So they're just bending this rule system to include...
Well, they say have a provision for rotating... Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And then team leader. So there's one person who's actually making the active decisions for the rest of the party. So essentially in conflicts, if you're not the team leader, for this conflict, you're surrendering your character to someone else. And of course, you're hopefully communicating with your party, but it does but I felt bad being the conflict leader, because in that instance, I was like, I'm making these decisions that could very easily lead to bad negative consequences for my teammates. It was like a weird pressure thing I did not like.
To add on to this, like you said, like we should be like talking with our party. I remember the time I had to be team leader. I didn't talk to anybody. I just went. And part of the reason for that, and I don't want to sound... I don't want to be nasty.
Be mean. It's not. If you don't say it, I'm about to. So go for it.
I don't want to be mean, but certain people in our group were not thinking ahead, and that's a very tactical combat, or it's trying to emulate a tactical combat without actually rolling dice too much. And part of the problem with it is you have 4 actions you can do. Cycle through them depending on, you've seen like attack, defend, feint, and whatever the 4th one was, but who the fuck cares?
Exactly.
Yeah. They all like do different things. It's based off the type of combat we're doing. They're tapping into different stats. And most of the time when people were team leaders, it's like, oh, we'll attack and defend, and we'll be fine. But then you had the GM who is catching on to that and is playing his moves where it's like, all right, oh, I'm sorry, I feinted you. That means I get an automatic hit on you now. Or,
right.
Yeah.
And I've also, I wish Skitch was here. Remember Skitch? We, went out the game theory. Yeah. And the game theory we discovered is that the only move worth taking is attack. I think they force you to cycle them now, but the only way to whittle down your opponent's disposition is to attack. So you always want to pick that move, and if you could, you pick it every single time, because the fight doesn't end until that guy gets to 0. All this other stuff of defending means you could get hurt. Feint is just an inefficient bonus to next turn's attack, which doesn't matter because, unless they're defending. Yeah, and if they're defending, they're not attacking, so you're not dying. It's that usual problem of like if you get back to tactics, it's like DPSing is king. If the enemy only goes down when they're dead, you need as much DPS as possible. So there isn't actually any tactics to it. This is what I'm complaining about when I complain about silly or toxic rules. It's busy work. The correct solution is to attack hard, fast, and often as much as possible, because that is your best odds of winning, and everything else is smoke and mirrors.
I completely agree. And the last thing I'll say about Torchbearer is another aspect of this, what you're pointing out here, which I realized when comparing it to other combat systems and conflict resolution systems as well in other games. Generally, they go this way. You make a decision, like to swing your axe at the skeleton, and then you roll a die to see if you hit it or if you miss it, right? And then the skeleton takes damage or doesn't. The agency you have in that combat is deciding to attack. The die roll and the numbers on your sheet, which are largely random or static, those things will determine the outcome of it. That's where the random, it sounds like this is very basic ABCs of gaming. So, but I want to say it because when you look at the card v card system, the cards are selected blindly. It's essentially like rock, paper, scissors. There's no way to predict what card the opponent is going to play unless you've gamed the system like by realizing that attack is the only one with value. And so, but generally there's nothing about the setting or the narrative that would suggest that one type of move would be preferential to another type of move. And what that's done is actually replace the agency you have in your decision making with a random system. And then you still roll dice to determine the outcome. So it's basically just taking away the one part of agency and replacing it with more randomness. So the entire thing is, like you said, Raph, it's busy work. It's a lot of rules and a lot of mechanism that does not produce anything that is engaging or meaningful. So...
Right. As I'm fond of saying, are you playing the game or is the game playing you?
There's definitely a case where it felt like the game was playing us.
And it's a shame because like certain parts of Torchbearer actually were pretty decent ideas. I love the mechanics with the lights, for example. I love how there is consequence for maybe doing too much at once. The big problem with the presentation of it, though, and I think everybody said this, is that this is like the purest definition of a mechanical game that I've ever seen. Honestly, since Burning Wheel, which makes sense because it is basically the same guys. So,
it's exactly like the problem with Torchbearer is the game Torchbearer is based on already exists. It's called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, or Osric if you want to go play that. Which already had rules for torches burning out, food being consumed, resting, and all that kind of stuff. They were all like meticulous and, like actual like planning sheets, like things were rated in hours and minutes. So you had to, go through all of that. And that was a lot of bookkeeping. And in theory, Torchbearer is trying to abstract that to kind of keep that down. But now you've got the opposite problem that you've just mentioned, which is using these rules to our advantage doesn't feel immersive. Like Red's complaining, combat is so abstracted from anything we would actually do, and the GM's just throwing cards at us randomly, so it's not even really strategy. We're not surrounding or flanking or using the environment. It's all random, so it doesn't feel immersive. And then some of the other complaints were like, okay, we get that you want us to not overextend ourselves, but now the rules have weird provisions in them that if someone tries to do something separate from the rest of the party, it causes time problems. Like they waste time for everyone. Like this is really what I want to talk about. The implementation is bad. The idea that you have a generic hit points and a party caller that calls everything out and does everything, that's not a bad idea on the surface, but the way it was implemented is bad. And I'm always going to say this: you pay designers for implementation, okay? Because you could just improv a role-playing game. You guys could all just sit down, make up a dungeon, make up shit, and just go do it. The rules that you're paying for is someone should have gone through the math and said, okay, if you have 80 hit points and you hit a 50% or better, then I want the fight to take less than an hour, I would have to make all these numbers like this in order to respect your time and get results on a regular basis that matched your expectations. And if the implementation is bad, it's a bad game.
Absolutely.
Kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
So I think on this note of terrible bad games and their bad rules, let's go ahead and go once over everyone and see, like, what do you guys got to conclude? Like bad rules or just topics you want to say? What do you guys got? Red, what do you got?
Oh, I gotta go first. There's no bad rules, just bad players. I'm just kidding. No, yeah, I think that a lot of people are attracted to games based on their flavor text and their fluff and the presentation of it, and they will not think critically about the mechanics that underlie it and what the book is. And I think that there's like a secret language that you can learn when you look at a game's mechanics to understand what exactly the game is mechanically trying to deliver to the table. Like, if you cut out all the fluff and you were just rolling dice and seeing the outcomes based on the rules, what kind of things would happen, right? And that's an important language that designers use to convey certain types of stories. That's what is so cool and interesting about mechanics, is that it's a system whereby stories can be generated ultimately. But that's the thing. I mean, it's very easy to be lured into a game that has bad rules because you're not looking at the rules. You're looking at the lore and you're looking at the pretty pictures. And when you do that, you can get into situations. Oh, and also a lot of games, especially these days, give the provision that, oh, if this rule doesn't work for you, just ignore it. Or if you're not having fun, just change the game. And once again, unwritten, as long as you're still paying us money for these books, do whatever the hell you want, and we're mostly fine with it. So learning to read the language of mechanics and rules, I think, is something that takes a lot of time and experience to really figure out. But that's why we have a podcast, because we've done this and we want to use this knowledge for something, I guess. Anyway, that's all I got.
Don't make the same mistakes we have. Get out now while you still can. Rob, what have you got?
You still have time. No, in all seriousness, I think it was like a couple of podcasts ago, like we were saying, like GM players should be very similar to GMs, or at the very least, like GMs can be very similar players in a lot of ways, and it's kind of like this mutual thing where both of them can get together and really understand what they're actually getting themselves into. And I think in that regard, one of the best ways we can like maybe root out like problematic rules or issues is a bit of communication on that, and actually having players to, understand, hey, this is what you're getting into. You're gonna be doing Torchbearer, where it's gonna be like this very abstract, heavily mechanical thing that's going on right now for your play. You're going to be doing a standard D&D. You're going to roll a D20, and your armor classes, you have to roll higher. Roll higher to hit. Or you're going to go old school, second edition, Ostrich, Swords and Wizardry. All these like clones that are trying to be like stuff that came out in the 70s and 80s because of nostalgia factor and all that stuff. Just do it with the THAC0. Roll lower. As long as you know what you're getting yourself into, I would say at that point, there's a mutual understanding between the game masters and the players as to what the rules will be, and any issues or problems that arise on there should be some sort of mutual way to resolve it that way. So I guess that's like the little bit of advice I can say. Outside of that, don't play 4th edition Shadowrun.
I played it once.
Exactly.
Rafferty, what do you got like here to like just conclude everything off with?
Well, I mean, one game that really cemented to help us with a lot of our design was Warhammer Dark Heresy First Edition. Namely, don't be Dark Heresy First Edition. When fans are excited after the game already came out that a second edition's coming out and will actually fix the problems. Oh my God, it's a joke. It was like I think hitting the nail on that. Rules are fun in a game when they are immersive. Like, I want to feel like I'm a fighter who can cut down a bunch of goblins, or a wizard who can blow up my enemies, or a troll who can swing a katana and chop a car in half. And when people want those kinds of things to happen, you rely on the rules to do that. And you can, I'm going to agree that everybody should be having fun. And thus you should try to improv around the problems that's got there. But then when we're talking about designs, like, there are games out there that are well designed. There are games like Masks, I think is one of the examples of a rules light game that I think also really does what people want. I mean, as Rob pointed out, Rollmaster has a lot of insane criticals and is very luck based and very swingy. There are people who like that, and what we're complaining about is when a game has a goofy rule in it that promise. Like I don't think anyone who came to a D&D game was expecting, half Shambling Mound, half Blue Dragons. That we're getting in the territory of just like ridiculousness or not expectations. Or actually, I'm mixing podcasts now, aren't I?
That's all right. I mean,
maybe a little bit.
No,
Let's
it's
just
all
go
right.
ahead.
I really want to. Yeah, we're so energetic. What I really want to just sum up here is that you can improv around bad rules, but the purpose of the rules was to make you all communicate better in the first place. So I could say, I move over here and stab the guy. We all know what that means. We know how far I can move. We know what dice I can roll. If I want to, invoke my privilege to, assert dominance from my clan over this other character. We know what all that stuff means. We read a book. We are all speaking the same jargon. When randomness comes up, it has risk that we understand and expect. We're not just getting randomly killed and that sort of thing. And good rules will mimic that. And if they don't mimic that, then they're bad rules. And that's why I'm complaining about games like, you'll see lots of reviewers talking about how great Torchbearer is, and it will make people like wonder, was there something wrong with me? Did the people play the same game I did? Often they didn't play the same game you did. They if they met a bad rule, they just bleeped over it. It's like someone who got a video game and sure, it crashed on me 17 times and wiped out my saves and stole all my money and put it in crypto. But other than that, the game was fine.
Or it could also be worse, where it's literally like, oh yeah, we read the game, we understand the rules. In theory, they're great. That's why it's getting good reviews, which is even worse in a lot of ways.
I haven't played
it could have been worse. It could have come over my house and jabbed me. Well, and it's also like when people, what we said about people read fluff more than crunch. It's like, out of all the problems people are mad, like I'm mad at D&D for letting you play an evil warlock and letting you go murder and and other things that would be considered evil. No questions asked, just write it on your sheet. People were mad that we took it out, so it's right there. But then people are up in arms that orcs are racially coded evil, and that's the thing we have to take out. And it's the weird things that people are objecting to, that the game material rewards you for being evil. We're just mad that you said orcs do that.
I mean, they tried that half measure in 4th edition and people complained. Okay. So
yeah.
If you remember.
Which is hilarious to me, because it was 4th edition had the mission statement. Okay, then you go play 5th edition and you have that problem where, the Tyrant Queen adventure I keep complaining about. The Tyrant Queen is rampaging through Waterdeep, a city run by evil people. Yes, and you should stop them. Why? Because you're the good guys? We can have any alignment we want now, right?
The allure of treasure compels you to complete the adventure.
They didn't even promise us treasure. We got to save it so the Beholder Underboss can get his city back. I mean, in other words, that's what I'm talking about. That's kind of a rules issue, but it's two-faced. Yes, you can play an evil character. By the way, we're going to publish all our material like you're a good guy. It's too. I mean, the Candlekeep adventure that we keep talking about, where people were complaining that they made it look more colonialist. It's kind of like, well, what if we're playing this as colonialist? Evil's right there as an option.
Yeah.
We're going to a dungeon to kill from people and then steal their stuff. Yeah, that's very evil.
Well, and that gets into the backward mission statement of what we talked about, which was, if they didn't want me to play an evil character, why did they put that rule back in there? If I showed up at the game as a chaotic evil person, the people, that hits the nail on the head. D&D 4 said you can't be chaotic evil anymore. People complained. But if you showed up at your D&D 5 or your Pathfinder game with a chaotic evil character, then the GM is suddenly the bad guy. I mean, they put it back in. People, it's a good thing, right? 5th edition, higher than 4th.
So let's go ahead and wrap that thought up then. What you got?
Yeah, but I mean, basically, we're all back to rules endorse behavior. And by that, if you have a rule in your book, you're telling people to do it, which means it's irresponsible to have rules in your book that you don't want people to do.
Yep.
One final thought, if I may. Remember, never make a rule where you roll for breath weapon when you fall off a horse.
I'll do you one better. Never do down to the second timekeeping. It's terrible. We should get rid of it. I absolutely hate it.
See, I can't agree with either of those because don't. I'm gonna go back to do not call up that which you cannot put down. Do
There
not
you
put a rule in the book that you do not expect to be used.
There we go, then. So that's going to go ahead and conclude it for now, then. So that's all for today for Notes from the Aleph. We stream episodes bi-weekly, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can join us live on twitch.tv at twitch.tv/practice. We also stream or record weekly tabletop games on the same channel, and you can come join us when we start at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norman Rafferty here is a partner and writer for Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com and join us on the Reddit and Twitter, and look forward to the upcoming Book of Corals Ironclaw expansion book. Don't forget to check out RedRabbit and book him for a game over on startplaying.games as RedRabbit, and be sure to check out Robert over on techraptor.net and read all of his wonderful articles as well. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and come see us all again. Until next time, everybody.